April 10th meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. Could we please have the taking of the roll?
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Lee. Here. Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Melton.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Berube.
Here.
Chair Thorson.
Here. As a matter of our bylaws, we do not have, the chair and vice chair are not here. We do not have a formal provision to appoint the secretary as acting chair. At this point, therefore, I will accept a nomination for the acting chair for this meeting.
I would like to make that nomination.
And I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. With that, let's move forward to the first item on the agenda, approval of the meeting agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda?
I believe we have a separate note in the packet about action requested to adopt the bylaws. Is that in the agenda?
That's
All right, then
under
we don't
section
have
7.
Thank you. There it is.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item number 4, approval of the meeting minutes from the meeting on March 27th. Are there any comments, changes, suggestions?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Minutes approved. Item number 5, community comment. This is the time where we invite the members of the public to come up and address the Planning Commission on matters not on the agenda tonight. So please don't be shy.
Move to close the public comment.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Item number 6. It's our first public hearing, our only public hearing of the night, a variance request for 4249 Crocker Avenue.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this is a variance request for 4249 Crocker. The subject property is located in the northwest corner of Crocker Avenue and Morningside Road, as highlighted. It is a 1 1/2 story home that fronts Crocker with the 2-car detached garage side loading onto Morningside Road. What you'll notice is that this particular lot has 2 front yard setback requirements. Front yard setback required along Crocker and then also along Morningside Road, given that the house directly adjacent to it is also facing Morningside Road. This is a survey of the existing home as it exists on the property currently. This is a tear-down rebuild. They're planning on rebuilding on the site, taking down the existing home and detached garage. The setback to the north is non-conforming on the existing home. It's less than 5 feet. It's, I believe, 4.9 at one corner and a little bit closer on the other corner. It should have a 5-foot side yard setback given today's standards. And then the setback along Morningside Road does not match the home that's directly adjacent. The south setback is a little bit over 16 feet. The new home will be located further away from the north lot line. It will actually provide a 6-foot interior side yard setback instead of the minimum 5-foot side yard setback. They will also be increasing the setback along Morningside Road from the existing home. It will be a little over 17 feet. The existing home is a little over 16 feet away. So in terms of the new conditions, it will be improving on an existing non-conforming condition on the south side, and it will be greater than the minimum setback on the north side. All other aspects of the plan do conform to the ordinance requirements. It conforms to the front yard setback. has a much more generous than a 25-foot minimum rear yard setback. It is within the lot coverage requirements. It's slightly under the 25% maximum allowable lot coverage requirement. It is within the 30-foot height requirement as measured from average existing grade. The new first floor elevation will actually be slightly lower than the existing first floor elevation, so they are not increasing the first floor elevation a foot that they could be doing. So this is the proposed floor plan of the main level of the home, the second floor and the lowest level. Here are the elevations. The top elevation is the elevation that affects the setback along Morningside Road. They will be increasing the setback just slightly from the existing home. They will have a garage loading off of Morningside Road, similar to the existing conditions. However, this will be an attached garage. And then this lower elevation is the elevation that will be facing Crocker, which is considered their front, the front of their home. They'll have their front door there, and this home lines up with the home that's adjacent to it along Crocker. And there's the north elevation, the interior side yard elevation that has a greater than 5-foot setback. Currently it's non-conforming. They'll be increasing that to 6 feet. And then the rear elevation, that would be the sidewall of the garage that would be adjacent to the house that's facing Morningside. This is a landscape plan that they've come up with, illustrating what their intent is for future landscaping when the home is complete. And here's some renderings giving you an idea of what it will look like on the block to scale, given the house next door. The house next door is a tear-down rebuild. They are not increasing the first floor height of the new home, so it actually is just a little bit lower than the existing home. It will line up with the adjacent home. And then here's the Morningside view with the home that's adjacent and fronting Morningside. There's quite a bit of distance between the two homes, and there's a driveway between the two that actually is the driveway for the home that's along Crocker. It kind of winds around this whole lot of the subject lot. So there is generous spacing between the two, and this is the elevation that is affecting the area of the variance. This is a grading, drainage, erosion control plan signed by a licensed professional engineer. There was, or there is, a memo that's been included in your packet from our engineering department indicating that it will not have a negative effect on adjacent properties. Here's a photo of the existing home. As it fronts Crocker, you can see the home next door. Currently, the spacing between the two is much closer. It will increase with the new construction. This just shows the homes that are lining up along Crocker with the existing home here. They will maintain that with the new home. Another view along Crocker, the house next door, and the spacing currently is much closer. And then going along Morningside Road, the existing house, the detached garage, and the home that's adjacent to it, fronting Morningside, and this is really what's setting up the requirement for the front yard setback variance. So the question is, does it relieve practical difficulties that prevent a reasonable use of complying with the ordinance requirements? The proposed use is a permitted use in the single dwelling unit district and complies with the zoning standards with the exception of the setback along Morningside Road. The practical difficulty is caused by the existing location of the home to the west, and the required south setback must be matched to the subject property. The proposed new home is reasonable on the south side due to the lot having 2 required front yard setbacks. This is one of the more difficult rebuilding situations. You have a narrow lot. It's subjected to 2 deep front yard setbacks. They also have a rear yard setback. So in terms of how much you could build on a narrow 50-foot wide lot on the corner, it becomes quite challenging. The existing house is non-conforming both on the north and south side. At the time it was built, it did not require any variances, so at some point in time, the location, the setbacks that were provided were adequate. And will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? Granting the variance to the south property line will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It's actually improving upon that existing non-conforming condition. And all other aspects of the plan do conform to the ordinance requirements. Staff does recommend approval of the requested variance, subject to the survey and plans date stamp March 12, 2019, and compliance with the conditions and comments listed in the environmental engineer's memo. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chris. That was good. I think you did answer it, but in fact, the view you had up of 4208 Morningside, that's the property to the east?
The 4208 Morningside, this,
Yes, that's
yes,
to the
that's
subject. Yeah.
the directly adjacent to it
Yes.
and fronting Morningside.
And it's just that single property that determined that south side setback?
Well, it's either that or the average on the block,
Yeah.
but that,
And it's
it
just-
doesn't help the
So
situation.
that, okay, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
visiting the site, I mean, obviously, so the non-conforming side on the north now is in conformance, correct?
Yes, in fact, it's 1 foot.
Yeah, I mean, that appeared to me to be so, yeah, they
It could actually be
fixed-
1 foot closer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. I think that long, narrow site, yeah, I think they did a good job, to make it work. Yeah, so I think it's a good fix. Thanks.
Chris, when we figure lot coverage, does it include the garage?
Yes.
All right, so I am just looking at their sheet for the new plan. Right now, it's stating that the lot coverage would be around 25%,
I think it's 24.8.
24.8. Did you know, do you know if that includes the garage?
It does. It's on the survey as well. The surveyor calculated the coverage. It includes, it's an attached garage. It includes the entire house.
So the entire footprint of the house plus the garage is 2,185 square feet. I think that's low. I did a calculation. I think that's actually just the house. So I think that might be wrong, that the actual lot coverage is actually closer to 30%. It just, in looking at it, it struck me that if the original house was, 18-some%, and now it's a significantly larger house, it didn't seem as though it was only 25% lot coverage, but I could be wrong. I just wanted to confirm that that house number of 2,185 square feet includes the garage.
It's also indicated on the main floor plan, according to the designer. They've included the garage, the house, the screen porch, the entry porch, and then the patio. The patio actually doesn't get included because it's 150 square feet, and we don't include that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, when you look at those figures, it does appear it's included. Although the numbers are slightly different. And do you know what's meant by, on that one of the drawings, it said preliminary, and then it said maximum? Let me see what page that is. Yeah, it would be right after that, the floor plans. Keep going. Next. next, right there. Okay, so on the overall, the very top dimension says 94.5, and then it says maximum 130?
I guess that would be an answer or a question for the designer. I was
Okay.
taking the hard coverage calculations off the survey, so I,
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any other questions for staff? I have one question, Chris.
Yes.
When we calculate lot coverage and it's a detached garage, does that get included in the coverage?
yes, it does.
Okay, thank you.
About three things, I think. One of them is, I hope everybody in Edina is watching this one, because it certainly shows that when you tear a little house down, you can't replace it with a little house. It doesn't work. You have to add the value. And there's a challenge there. This site especially is a challenge with that long, narrow house. There have been some questions asked by people down further on Crocker about lot area coverage and hard surface. One of the pieces I would ask would be on things like that patio, if we might look at ways to provide as much not hard surface. So if that patio might be a wood deck instead of a concrete patio, as an idea. One of the questions, too, is on the preliminary site plan. I don't think that planting plan reflects the sidewalk and the boulevard. And I don't know how you do that without that piece in there. I think there's something strange that I'm not understanding that I would like for them to explain to me. When you find it, that appears to be the curb line, and the sidewalk runs right through the bushes. So that's, I think, is an issue. And I think the other issue here, if it is, and I think there are folks here that might want to talk about eventually, about the water coming off the hard surface of this house and how it's handled and where it goes. But the downspout locations could be critical about how that might be handled. And I think that's a little bit more detailed than these drawings want to reflect at this point in time. So when we get to those pieces, I'd like to have folks talk about those.
That's okay, thanks.
Do you have a presentation?
What's that?
Do you have a presentation?
No.
Great, that's fine then.
Hi, Scott Fusen with Great Neighborhood Homes, 4615 Wooddale Avenue. I'm the builder, and I'm here with my clients, Sarah Bakken and Kush Chittapanda. They're the new owners. They're excited about moving into the Morningside neighborhood with their two children. I think Chris did a great job with the presentation. I appreciate the chair and the commission looking at this variance. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Mr. Hamilton?
Well, the first one would be the landscape plan, and it does seem to run right through the sidewalk.
Yeah, the landscape plan is preliminary plan. Obviously, when we go in for permit, we would have to turn in our survey with that plan. I can't have the fence would have to be inside the sidewalk per city requirements. It cannot be over the lot line. It cannot be higher than 4 feet. Can't be higher than 4 feet on a street side. So we would follow the zoning rules of the fence.
I think the real question on the site was we have heard from some people down on Crocker who have had water problems. You live on the top of a lovely hill, and good move, good thinking on your part. But the people at the bottom of the hill are worried about the additional hard surface that might show up there and how you handle it, and request that you be as respectful as you possibly can to that. And some of the pieces that would begin to answer that would be how the landscape is addressed, how that fence and hedge is addressed, how the downspouts are addressed, what happens with that patio, if it actually does need to be a concrete patio, or if it could be a porous wood patio, a deck instead, that wouldn't shed water, but that would allow it to percolate, where the downspouts go, those sorts of issues. They may not be critical. You're at the top of the hill and it's a long way to the bottom. But water does run downhill and they are concerned.
That's a very valid concern. Stormwater is very important. I know this area is an area that's been under study because of the lower part of Morningside. The engineered plan you have there, we carefully calculated where that water would go, and we're using both the front yard and the large backyard to percolate as much as we can before it would shed off the site. So we're not trying to shed onto our driveway or sidewalk. We're using the natural property within the lot lines as much as we can to percolate any stormwater there. But I think you're in the most important concerns are obviously 42, 47 next door being a closer home. So we've improved that grade there. You can see how we kind of come from the east side of that shared line, and the water will move, across there, percolate down, and then eventually to the front yard. And then there's kind of that continental divide there where it starts to go to the backyard. That water will go into the backyard and percolate there. So we try to use as much of our own property as we could to percolate that down, and not the hardscape, and definitely not the neighbor's property to the north. So it's a very valid concern. I think we worked with the engineer to come up with that plan to percolate as much as we can on our own property.
In order to do that, if the downspouts are predominantly on the east end of the house and they carry most of the gutter water on the east end, then it will percolate in your backyard. If they're on the west end, then they'll percolate in the short front yard and run to the street. So, and it looks like you have the option to do that, but they're not shown.
Yeah, the engineer did not take that approach. The house, the house has a lot wide eaves, so that water will distribute pretty equally around the perimeter of the house versus having one big heavy flow in one spot. So I think that will help that, even distribution around the house versus downspouts pushing heavy volume on one spot. But that's obviously something we'll take under consideration with the gutters, is to flow them to a wider area of our yard. I mean, putting a downspout on a driveway is never ideal anyways with our great climate we have this last winter. It'll freeze, create an unsafe condition, the sidewalk. I mean, those are things that I want to advise my clients to do so that, they don't fall down, they don't call me after they move in and say the neighbors are complaining about I've seen some where they've had flow on the sidewalks and it's just a bad situation. So we'll always try to flow to our percolation areas. The patio in the back would be a paver patio that we would have a set in sand, so it wouldn't be a concrete patio. And again, that would tip away from the garage and towards the backyard again. So I do think we get a lot of that with that large yard, a lot of good percolation in there.
Any other questions for the applicant? Ms. Lee?
So I asked that question earlier on your sketch here. You have a max dimension for both directions of the plan. What's that number, or which is the more accurate number?
The survey. Yeah, the surveyor takes the proposed design, and they go to the site and they site fit that, and that's the signed engineered dimensions of the house. That's the reason for a survey to have a professional calculation of that final footprint versus the architect's design. Architect's designs will get close, but that's because that's the same document that once we build the house, we will do an as-built on the foundation to make sure it meets that, and then when we're finally done, we'll do an as-built on the completed house.
Okay.
Just to make sure we've got professional measurements put in there.
Okay, and are you taking the first floor height up beyond what's
No.
currently existing?
No,
So it's going to be
actually lower.
It's going to be lower than what it's existing right now. Okay, so is there any grading that has to be done that would elevate the grade from where it is now around the house?
Just a little bit on that north side, we pitch that, towards the side. Right now, it's pretty flat, so if a lot of water came down, that would just pretty much put both homes, I think, a little bit at risk. But having a swale on our side that has a peak in the eastern end, that would allow that to flow across into our front yard, and then we would grade that from that point to the east to flow to the backyard. And then when we do our as-built survey on the final grade, we actually go around and put pins in to measure to show the city that we achieved that grade in there. So it wouldn't be a lot of grade. There's a little spot. I met with the homeowner at the home next door to the north, and we talked about a little bit of a berm that was just there for no reason. We might just kind of level that out to give us a flatter, more area to percolate more. So there's an existing garage, detached garage back that'll go away, so now that'll all be yard back there. So not really much grading. It's a pretty flat lot. We got 7 good trees that are all on the boulevard, so they're real far away from the construction, which is nice, so we wouldn't have to impact those trees.
And are you removing any trees?
So I met with the neighbors. We had a neighbor meeting last Tuesday. We had a good turnout, about 10 neighbors, and I walked with a few of them. We talked about the trees, and everybody had a story about a few of them. So I think there's a couple that maybe aren't healthy. So we'll walk around once they bud out with Sarah and Kush. We'll talk about the trees, and so we turn our permit in. The goal is to keep as many as we can, but if there's one that's hollow or diseased, we'll replace that with a new tree per the tree ordinance.
Yep, okay.
But they're really pretty far away. They're
Right.
from the home, so into the boulevard.
So are you expecting that you will have to apply for a watershed permit?
We will apply to Minnehaha Creek Watershed per the city's permitting requirement. We'll definitely, we're required to show them our permit before they issue the building permit.
Okay.
So it'll just be erosion control. There's no wetland or.
Right, right. And you built in this area, so you're very familiar with it. It's just this Morningside Weber Park area is been one of the areas that's been on high up on the city's priority list in terms of drainage. So it's subject to a lot of flood situations. So even our planning commission has been talking about adding an item to our work plan as far as looking at not just lot coverage, but the amount of permeable, impermeable surface. So I think on some of these, we'll be looking at where you are proposing walks and what types of materials are going to be more important now, I think, as we move forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of permeable products that are getting better. We've done a pervious driveway before, and there's rain gardens. There's some hydrologists have got a new system to kind of percolate within the water table of existing properties. There's a lot of neat things. I did talk to Ross at the comprehensive plan meeting, and we looked at the screen. There's a lot of, I think, new ideas coming out that would really be helpful for individual homeowners to do their part.
Okay,
thank
you.
So, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Just one more thing I'd stick in there. Once you throw your overhangs in, you're another almost 500 square feet of impermeable surface beyond the house footprint. So,
the overhangs?
Yeah. And, and that's collected in the gutters and into the roof drains. And so, even though the rain may slant back, it's still concentrated water that goes in one place. And, you're going to have neighbors here in the not too distant future, and you want them to love you, not hate you. And I think it's an issue. That whole neighborhood is very tender because they've been hurt in times past. So to the degree that you can, and I think there are things that you can do there, I don't think there's anything in the code that tells you that you must. I think you got a staff approval that says you can. I don't think that it's our job to tell you that you can't. But I will tell you, if problems exist in the future, they're going to show up on your doorstep with pitchforks, and you don't want that. So to the degree that you can, it is clearly a bigger house. It clearly has less permeable surface. Treat it with care.
I appreciate that. I mean, water, I will tell you, is our number one concern when we build, not, during construction as well, because there's always a risk when you're during construction that water is going to run off because it's unstable. So we're very conscientious of that. We just did a project over across in the Bandshell in Lake Harriet where we had a really tight quarters there, and we put in a system where that neighbor could hook up their gutters to our drain towel, and we did a better pitch. So it's something that's very close to my heart, from an environmental standpoint, but also just the individual job. I live 3 blocks from there, and they're going to move in there, and I definitely don't want to get a phone call from anybody about water. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Any more questions?
So just so I'm clear, you are attempting to hold as much water on site for stormwater, is that correct? I mean,
Yes, yeah,
okay.
definitely. When the way we've designed that was to use the yard areas the best we can. First and foremost, get it away from the neighbor to the north, and then use our areas the best we can within the limitations of the grade. I mean, the lot sort of tips from the north to the south, and which is a good thing because it's got that whole yard to work with versus if you had a steep yard that had like retaining and it's just running down quick. Percolation is also a function of speed of the water, and we've had lots where we build on hills and we had to put in like 6 silt fences because they'll just bust through and we get a big gully washer. So we try to, a flat lot is able to shear more slowly. It is better to work with.
Okay, yeah, and I think sometimes it means a real cautious placement of where the downspouts are. Sometimes we tend to always love the corners or places where they're hidden. In cases like this where there's a water sensitivity, you may have to give consideration to additional downspouts so that you spread that out a little more and give consideration so that it exits onto a grassy or permeable area before it heads out towards the street. And that's,
Sure.
I think, the thing that we'd be
It's a
concerned
good
with
idea,
and
yeah.
hope you to do
Definitely
that.
we'll look at that,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other commissioner questions, this is a public hearing, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
application. We will now open it up for the public that wish to comment on this matter.
Good evening, how you guys doing? I'm Brian Johnson. I do own the house to the north, 4247 Crocker, and I'd like to welcome these guys. Thanks for coming in, and Scott was generous to hold a meeting, and without a doubt, Morningside is ultra sensitive of what's going on. I do know there was a lot of interest in this property with a lot of builders, and a lot of builders passed because of basically the challenges of the lot. And I guess the only comments I have would be a couple things. Is there is a variance on the back where our driveway comes in off of Morningside Road. So I know we ran into an issue with that with the folks on the east side, which is 4208 Morningside, I believe. So on the back side, there is a variance where our driveway comes in. We own 10 feet of the land, but we also do have a variance to make sure our cars could go through. The other thing is on the back side where our driveway is, there is a little bit of hill. So if you are talking a little bit about water, and I didn't even really think about the downspouts of the water, I think that's something to be really cognizant about, because we are. And I do appreciate Great Neighborhood Homes going a foot off of our property towards the east. I think that will be helpful because, as you can see in the drawings, I think we're 4.9 and, 6 feet would be nice. But I would also ask just to be cognizant on the backside where the driveway is, there's a little bit of hill that comes down where water could be going in. And I know we did talk to Scott about that as well. So, again, those are just some of the comments I just want people to be aware of. Again, on the variance on the driveway, the downspouts. I didn't really give a lot of thought about the water from that standpoint, but some good points there. So that's all I really have to say. Yeah.
Help me understand about your driveway. What you're worried about is the water running down your driveway towards your...
Yeah, the reason is on the back side, there's probably I don't know, 3 foot, maybe 2.5 foot mound. And we have a really flat lot. So when we built, we flattened the lot. So on the back side, there's a little bit of a mound that the water could come back, and we have a fairly robust retaining wall on the east side of the property as well. So my ask is if we could kind of work on either flattening that or working on that from a water standpoint.
I don't see it on the drawings.
Yeah, it's hard to see if you walk it's, I guess I don't have a diagram or anything, but you can see where the 10 feet driveway is on the backside.
Yep.
If you walk down our driveway, you would probably see a mound about this high. So basically that water could make our driveway, well, it does make if you're gonna rebuild something, it would be nicer if it was a little bit flatter from that standpoint. Otherwise, we're going to retain a lot of water and have, like we do now, because there is the mound. But if we're starting from scratch, let's be cognizant about it and do it right, so we don't have a skating rink in the backyard, on the back of our driveway.
But isn't that on your property? Don't you own that driveway piece that runs through there?
We do, but it butts up to their property, and that's where the mound is.
You can see it in the city's area, the property map. Might show it better. Is that mound located behind that existing garage right now?
Correct.
Yeah.
Which that's going away, and now, what do you got to be, 25 feet off the back, I believe? Something like that?
And the retaining wall you're talking about is on the east side of your driveway, right?
Correct. So when we moved in, we were on we were on the property line, so we got a variance, or we paid the homeowner to get a variance to get maybe, 8 inches of land. So we took and put up a new retaining wall, which was really expensive. So we just want to make sure that's protected.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any other questions, or any other comments or testimony?
Move to close, public hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's bring it back up to the dais for conversation amongst the commission. Does anyone have any comments or further questions?
Well, this is an interesting case because I think this particular project embodies a lot of the issues that we have been faced with on so many other projects all in one. When we talk about smaller parcels with smaller homes that are at this point probably still affordable, and when they're torn down, what gets replaced often is a home that's much larger. You would think that even smaller parcels would still make a good lot for a smaller home, and yet this kind of shows right there that that's not necessarily the case. It would have been nice to see a smaller home rebuilt on this lot. John had mentioned that the finances don't work, I would say that probably this lot probably got bypassed by several other builders, probably because of the difficulty of it. So maybe in some cases, it's what you call a substandard lot, but it's certainly something can be built on it. It doesn't always have to be the biggest house that you can fit onto a lot. So in some ways, what I see as sort of the issue here is it's a characteristic of the lot. And does that in itself merit a variance? It is not in many situations where we have a homeowner that says, I've lived there for 25 years, I want to bump out and add on to my house. It is going to be a tear down, and we've had that discussion before as well. A tear down is kind of a chance to get it right. And given the setbacks, obviously we would grant a little leeway here being a narrow lot. It is not substandard. The lot next to it, the lot across from it, are all 50-foot wide lots. Its unusual circumstance is that it's a corner lot, and in some ways it has to adhere to two different setbacks. But again, no different than any other corner lot. So for me, I'm having a little bit of a hard time justifying this much lot coverage that will require not just a variance for what is the original 30-foot wide house, just give me a variance along 30 feet. It's actually asking for a variance along 60 feet of a new house, a brand new house. And so really the question is that justified? Is that justifiable? Has it been shown here that it is circumstances beyond the control of the owner? So that's something I'm struggling with a little bit. I'm also very sensitive to this issue of, again, this area is one that has really gone through its documentation of water issues. So had it not been for that, again, maybe I would be able to accept sort of this lot coverage issue in a more positive light. But to me, it feels like it's a smaller lot that merits a special treatment of perhaps a slightly different type of design that would really look at this lot in terms of its stormwater drainage and holding capacity.
Chair, if I could, I see that Mr. Vintner is here from engineering, and if he could perhaps address the hydrology of the site a little bit for us, we'd get a little more clarity. May we do that even though we've taken it back to the...
Absolutely. Please, Russ.
Chair, Commission members, I'm Ross Bittner. I'm the Engineering Services Manager, and I provided the review that's accompanying this property. You're looking for just general information about hydrology on the site, or the proposal?
Well, there's that. I think we had a discussion from the adjacent homeowner about their driveway and a mound there that, I'll be honest, I drove by the site and looked at it, and it never even dawned on me that mound was there, and I don't know what that does. I'm hopeful that you do. And yes, do you believe we have a problem here, or do you believe it is sensitive and we need to be careful of it, or is this a pretty standard construction and not one that we need worry much about?
Commission member, I brought a couple documents that are submitted from the applicant. I can kind of run you through a few of the things that I was seeing. The existing conditions site survey provides elevations along the property lines at the building corners, and then it provides some contour lines. And generally the lot drains both south and west. But what I was seeing on the survey was the neighboring property to the north has a couple window wells right there near the property line. Window wells are a point of entry and a kind of a special concern when it comes to grading and swales. So the engineer for the applicant had given me a call as they were making their proposal, and I described to him my concerns that along that north property line, making sure that we don't cause damage to the neighboring property was my primary concern. The proposed plan, I think we're kind of discussing something maybe over adjacent to this driveway. There is a high point there that this might be the mound area that the neighbor was referring to, but their driveway runs up the eastern property line. So my understanding just from these spot elevations is there might be a little bit of a flat area here. The applicant addressed the northern lot line concerns by creating a swale along that northern property line that flows off to the west. It's pretty deep, around 8 inches to a foot at places. So that was, given the small drainage area, that addressed my concern for those window wells.
But how about the catch basin for the site is down on Morningside, right at the corner?
Oh, so once the site drains off to the right-of-way, both Crocker and Morningside Road have curb lines that transmit the flow to local storm sewer systems. So once it's there, it makes it into our public system.
And you have no concerns there?
I do have concerns there. As you mentioned, that there's flooding in the Morningside neighborhood, but we reviewed this for consistency with our policy that interprets both the code and the comprehensive water resource management plan. And I was kind of over there sweating it a little bit because when I added up the lot coverages, it was looking like from the existing to the proposed, what do we call this? Lot coverage, that we're adding more than 1,000 square feet of lot coverage. But as you know, lot coverage isn't the same thing as impervious surface. So I looked to the stormwater management plan to see if they were under our 600 square foot new impervious threshold. And I couldn't find that directly offhand. So as I mentioned in my memo, these are preliminary reviews. We review them. It's part of the chapter 10 of the code. So at the point of building permit, I'll be making sure that the impervious surfaces new to the site don't exceed that 600 square foot threshold. If they do, then some sort of a mitigation measure is going to be required.
Ross, since we got you, especially with the plan that's up here now, if you look at how short the house used to be, those back downspouts had a fair amount of property to the east to perk before it ran off the site. And now it doesn't.
So then here's this existing conditions again. Maybe we can work together to point out the area you're concerned about.
Well, the house runs all the way back to that planter that's noted on the site plan on the other side of lot, which means you've got, instead of being able to run the stormwater back into the yard and let it perk back there, it has to run to the street.
Yeah.
Because there's no yard left.
So when I look at the existing conditions, and we do our review, we don't generally focus on the land area between the hard surfaces.
Okay.
Or there's gutters. We don't assume anything about gutters. That's kind of a future condition that's a little bit higher or more detailed than these plans get to. But I see a site that has a house nearly completely surrounded by grass, and it's flowing both along that north property line out to the west or across their property to Morningside Road. When I look at the proposed application, those things remain. The real change that directs Purvis directly is anything that's fallen on this driveway is kind of directed straight out. But I think Mr. Busen described it pretty well. Their design approach looks like everything that's coming off that back is still making that long travel path. Anything that's coming off this part of the site is still perking over. But those things aren't really material to our stormwater review. They might be good site design, but that's not something we're looking at in the calculations.
And according to the calculations, the site can handle it and the stormwater can handle it.
Yeah, it meets our policy.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Bittner while we have him? Okay. Any other commission comments?
So this is kind of going back to the character of the neighborhood. I think I would agree with Commissioner Lee's comments that based on the photographs you provided with us, it is a bit bigger than what the neighborhood housing looks like. And I think that could look a bit clunky. And especially because I think of Morningside as a sort of quaint neighborhood with a little bit of smaller homes. And so I think that's something to consider, is that you are building a larger home on a small lot with small lots surrounding you and smaller homes surrounding you. So I think one thing also that I wanted to just mention is that I noticed you had a 3-car garage, and as a way to kind of reduce the amount of area you cover on your lot, a 2-car garage could be something considered. I don't know if you guys are open to that, but that's something I would be willing to look at. So, yeah, that's my comment.
Commissioner Miranda?
Yeah, so I'd agree that if necessary, moving to a 2-car garage could be the simplest way of addressing the issues. But, I mean, ultimately, it seems like what we're looking at here is a variance just from the side lot. So they're not asking for, they're not overbuilding on the lot compared to what the city requires. And if there were another house south of there, this side variance wouldn't be needed, presumably, because they're not next to a corner, right? So really, I think my understanding of what we're looking at is does this, its distance from the property line, is that fitting within the neighborhood? And being that it's actually less than what the current house is, and it's also 1 foot further away from the north lot, so I think it's actually skinnier than the current house. Granted, it's much longer. But it seems like, it's less of a problem because it doesn't approach the property line as closely as the old house did. So I don't know. I think I'm pretty okay with this because I think it sounds like Mr. Bittner was fine with the drainage, and certainly we have issues with drainage in the entire city, and certainly in Morningside. As a resident of Morningside, I know that. But I don't think we've done anything officially to address that or to require them. So I don't think there's anything we should, I mean, it feels like we're, picking on this house for the sins of others, and I think, I was, I guess, kind of surprised by what I thought was how small the house is compared to other houses that are built in the neighborhood. So, or at least the thinness of it. So I don't see anything here that would make me think that we need to deny this variance. Thank you.
Commissioner Berube?
So I'm influenced by the compliance table and seeing the building coverage, which is within the city standard. The only thing that really isn't is that south lot line. And given this odd size of the lot, I can't imagine what you would build that would fit there. And I think given the lot, the design of the house is very attractive, and particularly from the front, it fits in really well. So along the side, it does look long, but I think that's the nature of the lot. So I'm influenced by that. I'm also influenced by the city engineer, saying that according to the calculations, the site should be able to handle the water. So I trust his judgment on that. I really don't have any problem with this. I think we should approve it.
Any other comments? I'll make one real quick. I do agree it's I think it's kind of a tale of two houses by the lot. The front, or the Crocker Avenue, I think is delightful and fits in very well with the neighborhood. Unfortunately, the Morningside, it's a narrow lot. If, to make this house conform, I think the Crocker Avenue elevation, that would have to be about a 20-foot wide house. I don't know how you make a 20-foot wide house not attached to other houses look the character of the neighborhood. And I'd also conjecture that if you took a slice of any other house on that street, there's probably a lot of that length, that depth, that's just uncovered in this case because it's at the end of a street. In terms of the stormwater, you're looking at 40-plus feet off both the east and the west side, which I think is pretty sufficient. Should we get into a situation where there's impervious surface issues, be able to percolate that. So I think that it's a challenge. I think it's relatively thoughtful and fits in, but it is a challenging lot, being a two-corner lot, and you always everyone has that one elevation on their house that no one else wants to see. I know where mine is, and I think unfortunately, this is with a corner lot. This is one of the challenges.
I move that the Planning Commission approve the variance request for 4249 Crocker Avenue, subject to the staff findings.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Section 7, Item A, Comprehensive Plan Update. Does anyone have any updates for the comprehensive plan they wish to discuss? Okay, moving on. Item B, 2019 bylaws. I'm sorry, Susan.
Sorry, couldn't get my hand up high enough. Okay, comp plan update. We just had a work session, obviously, to review the submitted comments from the public. So that closed out as of this week. I want to say Monday was the end of the 30-day review period. So I think it's a lot of interesting comments, and we're trying to right now address each one, or at least acknowledge in some way. And we have a code system that we're employing as the task force to recognize what category our decision kind of fell into. Obviously, that's going to take some time. We're going to be working hard on that, and I think the public hearing is in 2 weeks. Back here is the first public hearing in front of the Planning Commission, which is officially also the Comprehensive Planning Task Force, and then soon to be followed by a public hearing at the City Council level. Will they also get a public hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And from there, it actually enters into a 6-month review period for adjacent and surrounding cities to submit their comments. So we are far from done. But I did want to thank everyone who submitted comments online or spoke to all of us in any way, shape, or fashion. We try very hard to try to see it from all viewpoints, and many of you have the same viewpoints and opposing viewpoints. So keep in mind that the comp plan is really a general guidance document for the city of Edina to emphasize what might happen over the next 10 years. So it can't go into, nor should it go into, a lot of specificity, but certainly it should weigh in on the issues that are important to the people of Edina. So we hope that we will meet those expectations. So just wanted to provide that update.
Anything else on the comprehensive plan? Okay. Next item is the adoption of the 2019 bylaws. As you may recall, we reviewed these at the previous meetings. There was a few more administrative changes that were just aligning with the new city code, but there were a few, I would classify as substantive changes. On page 4, these are all outlined in red. notifying of attendance in advance, which we all do, but now it's formally in the bylaws. And then there's also some language limiting presentations to 20 minutes from applicants. And then finally, that's on page 7-8, and finally on page 11, where city staff will also be responsible for providing educational opportunities for members as a part of their assigned tasks. Does anyone have any comments or changes relative to the bylaws in our meeting packet? Ms. Lee.
Yes, on page 11, I would like to propose a little more tweaking of that. Right now it reads, provide educational opportunities for all members, including the role of a planning commissioner and an annual training session with the city attorney. I think we had discussed that most of us kind of came on at the same time, and it was a little rough, kind of learning by the seat of your pants. But we all agreed that we could benefit probably from a more formalized training session, and I think we've got those words in here, the role of a planning commissioner. What is it exactly that our duties are, and how far do our decision-making powers extend? So I guess I'd like to be clear about that what we'd like to do is provide an annual training session on the role of a planning commissioner, and if we'd like, an annual training session with the city attorney. I don't see them as one and the same. I think the attorney's focus is excellent, but more from a legal standpoint. And I think it was Jerry and I think John had attended a really excellent training session for planning commissioners.
WSB?
Yes, and the wonderful thing about it is we got to meet other planning commissioners from other adjacent cities and learn how they do things. And we actually had, weren't they like, what do you call them, test cases, actual proposals, and we were given it and broken into teams to decide, now how would you decide? And at the end, we were told how it actually played out. So it was very informative, and I think there was something about us having that same experience from the same trainer that was very valuable too, because we could point back to that. So that's sort of what I'm thinking in terms of an annual training session. So I'd like, if the rest of the group is in agreement with, is to state that as provide an annual training session on the role of a planning commissioner and an annual training session with the city attorney. So they're clear, they're different things.
I believe Commissioner Lee is just make sure it's annual, as opposed to, because the way I read this, annual just directly references the city attorney meeting, and I believe Commissioner Lee is recommending annual training in both spheres.
I think it does say that, because it does say and an annual training session with the city attorney.
I think for clarity, annual. You want to?
Annual for each. Got it. One thing I'll mention, some of you may recall, we used to do, I think it may have even been every other year, where we would get together with the planning commissions from Bloomington and Richfield, and we'd do a training opportunity and an opportunity to let each city know what the other was doing. And then there was that, so there was an educational element to it. What are other cities doing? And then you can talk to your peers out there too. That might be something that we want to get going again. It's probably been, I can't even remember the last time we did it, maybe 3-4 years ago.
I think it's 3 years. I remember. I thought it was one of the most useful things we've ever done for training. Well, just because it was very interesting to see the challenges each other, they join us, but their challenges are completely different than what we're facing. And I just found it just fascinating that they could literally be the next town over, and their problems are completely different than what we have. So
Yeah, now that we're finishing, each of us are finishing our comprehensive plans, now we've got some little more time on our hands to do that. So I'll try to set that up. Maybe we could do that this fall.
Laws, with the caveat that in the section regarding the training, so it is 16E, number 10, will clarify annual educational opportunities and an annual training session with the attorney.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Rolling on through our agenda, is there any correspondence or petitions? Number 9, chair and member comments. Any member comments?
So Commissioner Lee and I attended the second Transportation Demand Management Subcommittee meeting with the Edina Transportation Commission and Commissioner Mary Brindle, or Council Member, sorry, Mary Brindle. And we had this was our second session. We had a brainstorming session with good discussions about getting both businesses and residential, multifamily residential locations to encourage biking, walking, and transit. Councilmember Brindle even suggested the potential for a Hoven Ring bike bridge over France, which is this sort of neat circular bridge that has been done in Holland. As a potential long-term thing of getting people, because part of the problem is that you can have all these incentives to take transit or to bike, but if you don't have the infrastructure for it, then it's not going to work. So that was a pretty cool suggestion. And then our next meeting is later this month. Our first meeting included the director of the I-494 Corridor Commission, thank you. She couldn't make this meeting, but she'll be at the next meeting. And then, so that's the end of that. And then I also want to comment on the Edina High School students who addressed the city council at the last meeting. I thought that was a very powerful presentation that they did, and I just want to congratulate them for taking a stand on something that's so important to them and to bring that to the city council, and it's something that the planning commission always tries to think about. As we can see, we're in the middle of another record-breaking storm, so climate change is real, and it's something we have to deal with. So I wasn't happy, I don't think any of us were, with the snow that was coming down today. And then the final thing is being on the community committee for the E-Line. I got a ride on the C-Line bus. I didn't mention this last time, did I? No, okay. So the Metro Transit is looking at an E-Line. They're doing ABRT, Arterial Bus Rapid Transit, and they're looking at an E-Line that will replace the 6 bus that goes on France and Xerxes through Uptown, downtown Minneapolis, and then onto the U. Initially, the E-Line they were thinking was going to be a very short route because they were going to do just the busiest parts of it. But it seems like that they're now looking at extending that, so it may go along France. They'll choose one or the other. It'll go along France or it'll go along Xerxes if it goes this far south. And then they're also looking at extending it all the way to the U. So this will be 10-minute headways. So every 10 minutes there'll be a bus 7 days a week. So they gave us a ride on one of the buses that would be used. This will be built in 4 to 5 years, but they're deploying this on other lines like the C line, which will go through North Minneapolis. And these buses, the bus they had us ride on was a brand new bus. It's one of those articulated buses, and every bus on the E line will be an articulated bus. So there'll be plenty of room for everybody. And it was brand new, very quiet. It was a very nice bus. They have wider doors. They have, is there 3 doors instead of 2? So you can enter through any door because what you'll be doing is, it's like they'll have like transit stations. So you'll pay at the station. There'll be a kiosk or whatever to pay, or you have your go-to card or whatever. And you'll pay there so you don't have to wait for people to board at the front and pay the driver and get the right change and all that sort of stuff. Everybody will have paid. You just hop on the bus, any door, hop off the bus in any door. The stations will be about half a mile apart. I've kind of mentioned some of this before. They'll be raised, and so it'll be closer to a level boarding for the bus. So it'll be easier for people, especially with handicaps or with Edina having the oldest demographically population in the state. It'll be good for our residents. They have one-piece windows that keep the buses quieter. Push strips instead of pull cords to signal a stop, so it's a little bit nicer. And they're looking at making other BRT buses do this. They'll be able to extend the green light. The bus stops will be on the far side of the intersections. And so the bus may have the opportunity, the way emergency vehicles can, where they can extend the green light. So can't necessarily do that at every intersection, but it's something they're looking at. So these should be much faster, and because it's only half mile rather than stopping at every block, it'll be much faster. So we have another meeting at the end of this month. We'll be looking at, they're going to come back to us with the path they're thinking, whether it's going to go down Xerxes or France, and how far it's going to go to the U. And then we're going to start talking about where potential stops could be, because they're only going to be every half mile. Yes?
If my memory's right, then it's something like 3 miles square.
4, I think.
4?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means you've got, on whatever street that is, 6 stops or 7 stops. And to my knowledge, we haven't set aside the land for those particular buses, for those particular kiosks where you buy your piece. It's going to take a little bit of time, effort, and attention, probably on all of our parts, to make that happen. At your next meeting, you might want to quiz them about what that process would look like.
Sure, and that's part of the process of figuring out where the stops are, is what infrastructure is available. I mean, because they're going to be heated. I should mention they're going to be heated too, heated on demand, the way current ones are. So it's almost like light rail with rubber tires, So. But that is a good point, and I know that Mark Nolan used to be on the. I'm just on a citizen advisory committee. I'm not officially representing the city or anything. Mark, or his replacement, Scipione, what's his first name? Andrew Scipione, thank you, is representing the city for that. So I'm sure he would bring up those sort of issues with them also. So yeah, so I think that's all I have for that. And that's it, yes. Thank you.
Any staff comments?
None for me tonight, thanks.
All right. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion adjourned, or meeting adjourned.